Precept.
Greetings, everyone. So today this should be the concluding portion of our Precept 11 and neck and neck. So we've covered life force control, sex impulse control, which is a sort of an advanced initiatory presentation. So we didn't put that on YouTube or anything like that. And we covered relationships. So that's available on YouTube. And today we're going to discuss sexual immorality. And I think in Western culture, we have an extreme condition, extreme case. In ancient times, and when we're referring to ancient times, we're going back at least to ancient Egypt, to Kemet. And there are various periods of ancient Kemetic civilization. You had the very early period, which is the period after the unification of the civilization under the Pradhan Narmer. And it's about this time that the pyramid texts were written. And then you had what is referred to as a Middle Kingdom. And in between that, you have what's referred to as intermediary periods of decline. But Maatian consciousness was so strong in ancient Egypt, in Kemet, that for every dip in civilization, there was a rise. Because the priests and priestesses were at the forefront of the culture. So they knew how to manage the principle of Maat to bring about a reclamation of high culture, civilization. And so during about this period, or a little earlier, you have the development of the coffin text and the papyrus text, where is a development in the literature. The ancient Egyptian culture was a highly literate culture. Children were taught to read and write, utilizing the wisdom texts that were left by the sages. So it was a highly literate culture. And you have the late period with the late period can be characterized as a period where you're having a sort of an opening up and the mixing with say the Greeks and the Romans, the Persians, etc. And is at this time, the time with the Greeks, when the Greeks are kind of a mixed bag, if you will. They did a lot of good things, but they did a lot of things that were also, I could say, damaging. And is because of what they were going through as a culture and with their expansionist ideas, etc., that were mixed with kind of a fervor for the ancient Egyptian culture and religion. And the early Romans were the same way, but they had even a less understanding of the philosophy than the Greeks did. And then the Romans were converted to Christianity, Catholicism. And that is what caused the shutting down of the temples that the Greeks tried to maintain, although they were making mistakes and errors in the philosophy. At least they were trying to maintain the temples. And during the very dark ages, the Greeks actually preserved some of the writings that would have been lost, particularly the Hermetic text. And saying that is about this time during the Greek period where pornography came into Egypt, or Kemet. Before that, it was unseen. And we're talking thousands of years of civilization. If we're using what we know about the dating of the Sphinx monument through geological means, we know that the Sphinx is about 10,500 years, was created 10,500 years before the Common Era. And it's quite possible, if it's not highly probable, that it was created even before then, due to the type of weathering damage that's on it. It's a very ancient, old civilization that spanned many thousands of years. And in all of those thousands of years of high culture, you didn't have pornographic material. And people who study Egypt, they're sometimes you see that in the reading of the myth of Heru and Set, or in looking at the hieroglyphs, people make certain kind of, I would call, wild assertions that the relationship between Heru and Set, and you know, when Set tried to have sex with Heru, some people interpret that as either as a homosexual act or a evidence of pornography in Egypt. When reading the glyphs, they think that it's bestiality. For example, in the Temple of Hatshepsut, you actually see the initiate as a little boy sucking the breast of a cow of Heteru. And they will look at that and say, oh, that's bestiality. He's having sex with an animal. And all of that is based upon misunderstanding of the teaching of philosophy and how to look at it. So all during those periods, there was no such thing as pornography. I came in with degrees. And so the culture was a high culture of spiritual culture, meaning a mystical culture. So what we're having what we're seeing in the West is kind of an extreme case of a cultural downfall or a cultural inability, with all the sex trafficking and the sexual improprieties and the rape culture, the gang rape culture, and all of that. He didn't have that in ancient times. So something has happened to humanity. And one of the primary blows to humanity is that they shut the temples. That's the problem. if you shut the temples and you kick out the priests and priestesses and you cause this whole damaging cascade of events, you're going to be left with, and what we have seen through the evidence, you're going to be left with a hyper-materialistic culture. And you can have conveniences, you can have cell phones, you can have internet, you can have, nice looking automobiles, you can just go to the grocery store, pick up what you want. But what is the trade-off? That's the problem. And the trade-off, as we've seen, is degradation of the environment and degradation of the human being, generally speaking. And so that's the sort of at a macro level of what's going on in society and culture. Like, for example, a perfect example of this is Bill Clinton with what happened with him and Monica Lewinsky years ago. And Bill Clinton was allowed to remain president and so forth. And there's no evidence of any Prada, meaning any pharaoh during the high period time that engaged in such impropriety. And if there was such impropriety, the priests and priestesses would have kicked him out, would have dethroned him. Because the priests and priestesses that advised the pharaoh were the priests and priestesses of Maat. And the reason why was because they advised the pharaoh on the principle of order and righteousness to sustain the culture. The culture was based in the value of the soul discovering its divine nature. Nowadays, it's the value of materialism. How do people get attracted to people nowadays? It's the size of your bank account, the kind of car that you have, what's going on with you financially makes you an appealing person to the opposite gender, to other people, in building relationships, etc. And so there's no the value of the spiritual evolution of a human being. That's not even a thought. You can't take it for granted because to take something for granted, you have to know that it's there. Yeah, the people, they don't even want to know that it's there. It's a materialistic culture. So that's more on a macro level. On the micro level, this is an important aspect to look out for in your relationship with others, in relationship with yourself. As far as breaking certain cultural norms of the purity of the soul. I have not done anything against my own purity. And so if you're in a relationship with someone, the idea is that you're in a relationship with that person and you're using that person, the relationship with that person as a means to grow spiritually. And so if you go outside the relationship, you do something outside the relationship, then the usefulness, the sacred usefulness of the previous relationship is sort of damaged. And then it takes time to repair that, if it's even repairable. And if you think they have had TV shows that have ran for years based on infidelity. Shows like Cheaters. It ran for years, and the only topic of this show is infidelity. That's it. So it gives you an idea of the degree of the problem, the magnitude of the issue. But it also, watching shows like that also gives you an idea of how damaging infidelity is to a relationship, to the other person, the person that has been wrong, but also to yourself as a human being. How damaging it is to yourself, and it's hard to overcome such humiliation, self-humiliation. In the temple of Abu Simbel, there's a teaching where you're looking at yourself as the divine, and the divine is reflecting back to you. In other words, like looking in a mirror and seeing the divine. And immorality, sexual immorality, when you look at yourself in a mirror, you can't see anything but shame. So you're shutting off yourself from the apprehension of yourself as a divinity. That's how damaging it is. And then to come back from that, if it is possible in this lifetime, you have to go through lots of purification and cleansing and lots of inner transformation. Whether you're forgiven by the wrong person or not, the work is on you to cleanse yourself, to purify yourself. And to do that, you have to see how wrong the problem is. Once a spiritual teacher told me, when we're discussing this issue, can you think of a more egregious act than infidelity? What he was saying is that this is top tier, this is top tier immorality. This is something that is very damaging to your spiritual evolution. So it's better to leave a relationship than to engage in something that is going to be very hurtful. And you not only have to deal with how it's damaged you, you also have to deal with the karmic repercussions of the pain of the person that has been wrong. It's a serious spiritual issue. And therefore you find lots of complications in modern society because of this. Right, there's a basketball coach now, the Celtics, that's going through this issue. And that's because of the hypersexual nature of modern culture. You're popped out of your mother's womb and you're thrown into this morass, and there's nothing spiritual to hold on to. So you're caught in this web of really a degraded culture. And if you can't find a spiritual program, you're going to get caught up in it. You're going to get caught in it somehow. It's not like in ancient times, you come out of your mom's belly and you're an infant. You're sucking at your mother's breast, but you're hearing the pounding of the drums coming from the temple. And You might hear the chanting of the priests and priestesses over the walls of the temple. Doesn't mean you're going to turn into a sage or a saint, but the cosmic influence is there. You're taken home and there's an altar to the divinity in your home. So there's something to hold on to, something to grasp, to lead to a healthy life, if not an enlightened life, at least a healthy as a human life as possible. And so in ancient times, people were stronger. So you could have dips, but then you also had the return because people were strong because of the influence of spiritual values and society and culture in human beings themselves. And so these are things to look out for. And having thoughts or feelings of multiple partners, all of this kind of stuff may seem wonderful on the surface, but you have to realize what you're getting into, what you're diving into. You might say, well, in certain African cultures, we had our polyamory and all of this kind of stuff. And that may well be so, but not every African culture is on the level of Kemet. And if you notice, I never said Kemet was perfect. In fact, I'm reiterating that it had dips, but you can't find anything that was higher than Kemet. And if you're going by other cultural norms or other cultural ideas that the sages rebuked in their time when they were at their influence during the downfall period, they were saying, no, don't go there. And you go there, you might think that you're doing something that's righteous or mystical or African or whatever, however you want to put it. You're going to think that you're doing something good, but there's going to be a piece of impurity within you. If something impure is going to be there, and that's going to lead you from the ultimate truth. That you may have some little truths, God is one, we are all one, etc. You may have some intellectual truths, but you're still tied to the world. And you're still tied to, when you're having multiple partners and all of that kind of stuff, you're grasped in the tentacles of duality. Duality has taken hold of you. And that's because you have no spiritual power. And then, since you're grasped by the tentacles of duality, it means that you'll have a reoccurring life. You'll have a reoccurring apprehension of the physical plane of existence. And since the physical plane of existence is essentially illusory, that it means that you're mired in delusion. Now, the Pradawu, for certain political reasons, may have had one or two wives, etc. But I haven't seen any evidence of a kind of strong tendency towards polygamy or anything like that. And the strong and people marrying cousins and so forth. These are speculations because no one is around to really know. So there's lots of speculative activity going on. And so this is something to look out for, really, to grow if you want to grow spiritually in a serious way. So that's the issue of having multiple partners, two partners. It's really a serious situation that most people don't think is very serious. Most people who are into that kind of lifestyle don't think that it's very serious. But when you're in it, you're not thinking it's serious. But when the hammer comes down, you'll see how serious it is. And the hammer is the karmic repercussions. Etc. And this idea of raping people and if we go back to a societal perspective, and I think in looking at these things, I think when like last year, there was this great push by the Republicans in America, that they don't want the discussion of slavery and systemic racism. They don't want to have that discussion. They don't want their children to learn about what really happened. And I think the reason why is because some of the acts were so horrific that people are not ready. They are not ready to face the issue of the culture that they have essentially benefited from and inherited. There's raping someone, taking someone by force. In the case of the raping of women, it is such a horrific act against the dignity of another human being. You're essentially taking away her dignity, her sense of the sacredness of her body. You're taking away her sense of sacredness as a human being. She's a soul caught in a female body. So there's a sort of a kind of human feeling that goes along with that. And part of that is the sacredness of her body, at least generally. And when that is taken by force, you essentially break the person. You break their sense of humanity about themselves. And if this is going on, and studies have shown that it was put it to you this way, it was more common than is currently known, and common and open, and it's happening on a daily basis to the women on the plantations or whatever. And I think that's one reason people want to talk about it. Is you have to, this Precept 11 is of such seriousness and the way how it's, I consider this translation a very authentic and very, this is how the sages would have loved to like to see it. And it has such implications for humanity, for human beings, for society. And if you break any of them, if you break this one, you're really going against, in especially from the perspective we're looking at it now, from the perspective of rape, you're really going against a certain kind of core basic principle of human nature. And it is known that not only women were raped on the plantations, etc. It has such a kind of, but the men were not only raped, they were also sodomized. You know, the ones who were taught to be uppity or, you know, fighting for their, or, you know, kind of, they have to break them somehow. So it has serious issues. For you as a human being, you have to be very careful in modern times to protect your mind, your feelings, your thoughts. Because you're guarding the mission of the soul. And so we talk about these things because we are, you know, these are human values. It's not only an African problem, but Kemetic religion is an African religion, and you're looking at the view from, you know, an African perspective. If you were Tibetan, you'll be talking about what happened with the Chinese while talking about the issues in your, you know, the Buddhist Dharma. So it's something to think about, and knowing people who are suffering from some of these issues as spiritual practitioners, to have deep compassion for them. And your ascet nature has to be flowing with the, you know, the surge of the ocean. The people who are caught in multiple relationships, or have been raped, or are in a relationship that's not good for them, where the husband is essentially raping his wife. All of these kinds of things happen. You have to be, you know, very, because they are suffering the karmic trail of the destiny of the soul. And so, you know, you offer them great compassion. And when you're there for people, and you're there for other people, other human beings, it elevates your humanity. And, you know, not turning away and or that's your problem and things like that. It elevates your humanity. And then you can, and if your humanity is elevated, then your insight into divinity is that much closer. And that's the whole process of the teaching of the philosophy, is to discover one's own divine nature. And then the last issue is how you protect your, mentioned it a little bit, and now we're going to talk about it just a little more, how you protect your mind. The kind of, if you listen to the music nowadays, and I'm hearing more modern music now than I've done in the past 20 years or so, because of because of something, I'll put it that way. If someone plays their radio all day and it's in earshot of me, no one here. And the kind of lyrical in the content these days, it's very hypersexual, and hypersexual to, I would say, to a very degraded degree. And so how do you protect your mind and your feelings and your thoughts? And that's where the spiritual practices are so powerful, that if you actually do that, you can go through the world, and not untouched, but with strength, with necked spiritual strength, and your dispassion and your disgust, your kakabu. If that is strong, then that's how you protect yourself. But it has to be strong, and how you make it strong is by practicing daily. So I think that will do it for Precept 11, and then we'll come back next week and continue. So things to think about, these issues, and to understand that if you're practicing in an authentic way, you're practicing in a way that was not tainted by these issues. You're not practicing something that is tainted by spiritual impropriety. And at times, I think that modern practitioners really don't, sometimes, they don't really see themselves. If you're a modern practitioner, you've reached a very good place in your life. But you have to see that, and you have to know that about yourself. You reach a very, very good place if you're practicing authentically. You're practicing in a way that is untainted by degradation and impropriety. So you have to know that about yourself. And it's not to have pride, it's to understand. And in that understanding, it gives you even further resolve in your process and in what you're doing, what you're feeling, and what you're knowing. So just continue on your way. Okay, do everyone. Hit 10.